Welcome to the Reddit Chronicles. Today we will be reading from Today I Effed Up. Our first post is by Throwaway. Today I effed up by stalking my husband's Reddit account, using a throwaway because he probably knows my main and I don't want him to know I know yet. This also technically started a few days ago, but it's been stuck in my head since, and I need to get my thoughts out. When we met, and the entire 3 years we dated before we married, I was always firm about not wanting kids. My husband told me that his stance on kids was along the lines of kind of undecided, but overall not a good idea. Always said he used to want kids but changed his mind later in life. I wholeheartedly believed him until I decided to snoop. We're both pretty avid Reddit users, and he wanted to brag to me about how many upvotes one of his comments had. I watched him as he clicked on his profile to find it, and I caught his username and a glimpse of another comment where it looked like he was talking about me. We've never tried hiding each other's accounts from one another, so it's not like his was secret, but I still feel a little bad for letting curiosity get the best of me. I looked up his username later in the day to check out what he had to say about me. To his credit, he was gushing about me, and it was really sweet. But quite a few of his other comments also talked about how he wishes he could have children of his own, and that the only thing stopping him is me. Talks about how his desire to be with me outmatches his desire to have kids, but he's still heartbroken that he can't have both. I still don't know what to make of it. On the one hand, I'm hurt that in the almost 10 years we've been together, he's never talked to me about this, and instead lied to make it seem like we were on the same page. I feel immense guilt that I've taken such a choice away from him, especially after reading about just how badly he wants it. On the other hand, and I can't believe I'm about to type this out, it's making me rethink my stance. For the first time in my 32 years of existence, I'm uncertain about whether I want kids or not. I've always thought pregnancy birth sounds like a nightmare, and I simply don't have the mental bandwidth to devote all of my time to raising a child. But suddenly I'm having daydreams about it all. Hell, just last night, I fell asleep while fantasizing about what would happen if my birth control failed, and we decided to just roll with it instead of getting an abortion. Every argument I try to come up with against it is easily refuted by how our life is currently going. We own our house, we both have good jobs that pay well, and I work from home on my own schedule so we wouldn't have to worry about daycare or extended maternity leave. The fact that I'm even reconsidering is absolutely terrifying. What if I think on it for another year, decide to go for it, and then regret it? What if I'm only thinking about it now because I want to make him happy? What if I decide to ignore these thoughts and later regret not trying before we got too old? What if he thinks he wants me now, but later resents me for not letting him live the life he's always wanted? Anyway, this got much longer than I thought it would be. I'm using this sub instead of something like r/confessions because I do consider this an F-up. I regret looking into his Reddit account. I wish I could go back to a few days ago where this wasn't on my mind and I thought things were going great between us. I'm sorry if this isn't as interesting as today I effed up by sleeping with someone's mom or whatever usually gets popular. I just needed to get all this off my chest. Edit. I was not expecting this post to blow up as much as it has. I'm sorry I haven't responded to many people, but I promise I've read almost every comment. I was gonna sit on it for a few more days before saying anything to him, but everyone calling me out for essentially being a scaredy cat is making me realize I should just talk to him tonight before I let my weird anxiety blow it more out of proportion than it already has. I still haven't decided whether to bring up how my views have changed regarding children, as I don't want to get his hopes up if I change my mind back. I'll see how the conversation goes. To address a few things I've seen mentioned by you guys. 1. Don't worry. I'm not throwing out my birth control tonight and jumping straight to baby making. I'm honestly still leaning more into the not having any kids side, and if my mind changes more, it's still not happening until we both want one without a shadow of a doubt too. Just talk to him. Communicate. I appreciate the concern, but keeping it to myself forever was never an option for me. Our communication is usually fantastic, and I'm planning on sitting down with him. I was just panicking a bit while writing this and wasn't sure the when, how, what, all I'd like to share with him. 3. Why do you think doing the same thing he did will solve your problems? You know what? You got me there. I'll probably show him this post eventually anyway, so I'm not sure how much water these comments hold, but you may be right that I shouldn't have shared this with strangers on the internet. I will say though, I kinda get why people do it now. To quote one of my own comments, it's like having a sea of little angels and devils on your shoulders, which to be honest is a little cool and almost cathartic. Our next post is by White Boy the Third. Today I effed up by knocking a third grader's teeth out. I work as a camp counselor for the YMCA, and every group leader has a walkie so we can talk to other group leaders to know where everyone is at. Of course, the radio I was given has a broken antenna, but I had no clue. It easily would just pull off and on, but I hadn't touched it, so I didn't know that. Well, around lunchtime, this third grader named Hunter was standing about 6 feet away from me minding his own business when he looked at me and pretending to throw a baseball. I saw him do it, and I turned into a batter's stance and swung my radio by the antenna as hard as I could, as if I was swinging a bat. Well, the radio flew off the antenna straight towards Hunter and knocked his 2 front teeth out. Not only did his teeth come out, but since it hit him square, they shot right down his throat. One of them he coughed up, but the other one went down all the way. I had to file an accident report and explain to my boss and Hunter's parents what happened. His mom was so angry and upset with me she almost wanted to press charges. His dad told me he wasn't too upset, and that's one less tooth he has to buy back as the tooth fairy. All in all, it wasn't too bad, but I absolutely destroyed that kid's teeth, and I pissed off my boss and the kid's mom. Our next post is by Haggis McNeil. Today I effed up by ignoring my vegan host. My friend and I, both freshly 18 years old, had saved up for a few years to travel the world. We started with Canada, where we first stayed with my friend's cousins to save on costs early on in the trip. One of the first things we were told by the wife, let's call her Linda, as she was driving us from the airport to her home, was that her husband was a hardcore vegan and we mustn't bring up the subject and must definitely not ever eat or bring meat in the house as it upsets him. Easy, no meat. How many meals need meat anyway? And we're only staying here for a month. My friend and I were both into fitness and got into a good exercise regime during our first weeks in Canada. Walking, running, calisthenics, etc., which made us, naturally, very hungry. We were both also very aware that exercise is extremely benefited by a high amount of protein, and the only meals we had been eating mainly consisted of pasta, cheese, and potatoes, so we were feeling a little malnutritioned and felt our hard work was going to waste somewhat. One morning, our hosts told us they would be out for the whole day, which at first wouldn't make a difference to our day, as we would likely be exploring the local area some more anyway. That afternoon, my friend and I were on a stroll when I had the brilliant idea of, instead of having the usual cheesy pasta tonight, why not reward our bodies with some source of protein? The hosts were out, so they would never suspect a thing anyway, and I am sure even if they did, it wouldn't be an issue, as there would be no trace of meat anywhere. My friend agreed, and we went into the nearest supermarket and bought a few tins of tuna to go into the cheesy pasta. We got back to the house and I made the meal, which really hit the spot and filled the gap we felt had been missing in our diet for the past couple of weeks. We washed up and went to chill around the house. Our hosts returned from their day out. My friend and I are sitting in the same dimmed room, relaxing, when all I see is a shadow in the doorway. "Have you been consuming dead animal in my home?" a stern voice said. How could he know? And made sure to clean everything meticulously. I panicked, and my first instinct was to lie. "EHHM, no," I say calmly. starting to notice my heartbeat thumping in my ears. "Then why does my home smell like corpses?" I broke and said I added some tuna to our meal. He shook his head and stormed upstairs. I'd like to remind you at this point that we were two young, well-meaning lads trying to make a good impression on the world who had undervalued some earlier advice, and this confrontation hit us harder than it would have now. My friend and I looked at each other shocked, not knowing what to do now. The husband wasn't the most approachable man at the best of times, less so when we've just broken his #1 house rule. After about an hour of contemplating, we went upstairs and nervously knocked on his bedroom door. My friend explained the situation for us, which at the time I thought was fair, as it's his family, despite him not knowing them that well. But now I know it should have been me, as it was my idea. The husband stayed pretty quiet, but his wife was also in the room, comforting him. We went to bed that night not knowing if we were to leave the next morning, despite having not booked anywhere to stay for another 2 weeks. The next morning, my friend and I were greeted with a piece of A4 paper that had been slid under our bedroom door. Confused, we went over to pick it up. It was a full-page letter from our host, in detail explaining the rules of staying at people's houses, how you should act, and that your presence should be a gift in return for staying there, and that you should always, whether you agree with them or not, follow the rules of that household. At first, we were relieved to see there was no mention of us having to leave. And, of course, these are all wise words, and I did eventually take them on, despite feeling somewhat rebellious at the time towards such an authority other than my parents. We continued our travels for 8 months and came back to our home country of Scotland, more mature for it. The end. Thank you for listening to the Reddit Chronicles. Follow for more content.